here's a technique that involves probably one of the most underutilized baits that we have in bass fishing, and that's a curly tail grub. Curly tail grubs have been around for years and years and years. They catch tons of fish. They'll catch fish all throughout the year, from really cold water conditions to warm water conditions, whether they're shallow, deep, or somewhere in between. And there's really no wrong way to fish a grub. But this particular technique that I like, instead of using a regular single tail traditional grub, I'm going to use a double tail grub that we often use for, like a jig trail or something like that, or a chatterbait. I'm going to take this double tail grub and rig it up on a ball head jig. 3/16 or 1/4 ounce works the best, just like you would a traditional single tail grub. Slide it all the way up, snug it against the head. And one thing I like to do before I really start to fish with this too is put a couple of drops of glue in between the bait and the head, and then snug it up. And that way it'll keep your bait snug against the head and prevent the fish from pulling the grub down if you get short striking fish or whatever. So it just gives you a little bit more security of having your bait cinched up against the head real nice. So I want to make sure with this double tail grub that I run the hook straight through the middle of the bait so that both legs are even on both sides. And it's a very, very simple technique. And this particular technique I call it gliding. And what I'm trying to do is kind of work the water column and try to figure out where the fish are. And there's a technique that you can use out in deeper water. I would say, as shallow as 8 feet and as much as, 20, 25 feet. That's kind of the range where it works really good in. If there's any kind of structure, boulders and rocks tend to be the best that the fish will get in and around, or if they're just suspended. That sort of thing seems to work the best for this technique. And it's very simple. Just like you would with a regular single tail grub, you're going to make your cast typically with a spinning rod with 6 or 8 pound test fluorocarbon line. And instead of actually letting the bait fall on slack line and getting to the bottom, what I'm going to do is go ahead and make my cast, and I'm going to immediately flip my bail back over and let the bait fall on a semi-tight line. And what that'll do is it'll kind of make the bait pendulum down. So the bait hits the water here, and instead of falling straight down like this, it's actually going to curve a little bit, and it's going to kind of glide down through the water column. And that's when you get most of your bites. You've got to pay attention to your line a little bit. If you know you're in 20 foot of water and your bait only falls 5 or 6 feet, it's time to set the hook, because you probably have one on. A lot of times they'll bite this bait in the water column when they're, it's a visible thing, so they're seeing the bait kind of glide through the water, and both of those tails are wiggling back and forth. And that's when you get a lot of strikes. The other times that you'll get bites is when the bait comes in contact with the bottom, and you're actually working it over those boulders or those rocks or that little drop or whatever. So I'll throw the bait out, click my reel handle immediately, let it kind of glide down. If I don't get bit at that point, I'll work it along the bottom a little bit, wind up, make another cast. Very, very simple technique to master. It's an awesome technique for catching both largemouth and smallmouth and spotted bass. And it's just a technique that not a lot of guys do, not a lot of guys use. And especially with this single tail grub, really makes it effective in the rate of the fall that it has. I think that by using a double tail grub, it affects the rate of the fall. It lets the bait glide a little bit better through the water column. It increases the profile of the bait a little bit, and will get you a whole lot more strikes. So if you're a fan of fishing a regular single tail grub, or if you've never fished a grub at all, try one of these double tail grubs on a little ball head jig and go gliding the next time you're out there fishing. I'm Mike DelVisco, and I'll see you on the water. And for more bass fishing info, log on to FINS'nTALES.com or like them on Facebook. Fins and Tales, your hotspot for bass fishing stories, videos, people, places, events, how-tos, product reviews, and so much more.